What is up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Travis. Of course, this is TWA Motorsports, and today we're gonna pick up where we left off on the Trans Am. I know a lot of you guys have been wanting this. This thing's been apart for a long time, but today we've got some issues, right? So we got, in the last video, we put a lot of stuff on the engine. I know I drug that video out. It was filmed over a couple months of getting parts and whatnot, but the motor's in. And I think for the most part, I don't think I'm gonna have to take it back out, but here's the problem I've ran into, guys. The next step is obviously we're gonna have to start putting some of the hot side or cold side piping on, and my brake lines are just not gonna work. So I think we're gonna have to re-bend some brake lines. As a matter of fact, you can see where my brake lines come out now, and I thought this was pretty close to factory when I put this together, but it's not. And so what needs to happen is this piece needs to be bolted to the K-member, and we're going to be using this other side in order to get the mounting for this piece of piping that's going to go up to the intercooler. But in order to do that, I really want to put this guy in place so I kind of know where my brake line needs to go. And then I think, guys, I really think we're going to have to take the rack loose, take it off the car in order to give me the room to bend the brake lines where I want. So what I ended up doing when I put this K-member in is I put this all together without the motor on. So I put the K-member in and the brakes and everything up into place, and it's been a process because I wanted to try to use the factory brake line, so I just kind of manipulated them back into where they needed to go. I used an older style flaring tool. I've got that newer one now that does a way better job. I just would feel more comfortable anyway. But guys, this factory routing of the brake lines, I just never loved it the way it looked, and we really don't have far to go on this side. So this side right here just needs to go up and under. You can see where this other line is coming up. We've got a T already made off the bypass because we took the ABS off and we put a proportion valve here and a line lock. This is all part, these lines are all pre-bent, came from SJM manufacturing. So this is all good, but then I put a T right down here, and that T is where our lines are coming up into. So I'm fine with that. Everything as far as the T down is good, but we need to bend a new line to go to the passenger side and this side. So what I'm gonna do first is I'm going to, I don't really want to take this apart if I don't have to. I'd like to put it all up as one unit. So in order to do that, I'm going to have to run my coilovers down. I chose to go with Viking coilovers. I haven't even driven on these guys. We started this process. I bought these and then I pulled the motor apart. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to spin this guy down, this sleeve down, the jam nut. I'm going to loosen the pressure on this and see if we can compress that, because right now I tried to put it up in there and that wasn't working. The other thing is you're gonna have to snag your bolts for the top here. Obviously, we're gonna have to put it into place. So I'm gonna do that as well, but I'll try to show you guys the process, or at least once I get it installed, kind of what we're dealing with at that point. Now the process for this, I put a little more anti-seize on the threads, but I ran this jam nut down pretty far, and then I don't have enough strength to do this. But what I've got is my spanner wrench, and we're running this down to try to shorten this shock up so I can hopefully get it all in as one unit. And it may get really loose, I don't know. But we just don't have enough compression to get it in there. I just don't want to knock the ball joint loose if I don't have to. Should get a little easier when we get down to some more of that anti-seize. There we go. See, I can do it by hand at this point. And I'm not necessarily worried about a measurement or anything like that. Like I said, I'm just trying to get this thing, see how much looser it is now? Now look, the spring is pretty loose. So now hopefully we can take this over to the car and maybe put this all in as one piece, or at least that's the plan. Let me spin this up a little. Let's see if we can get it in the car now. Well, that didn't work. So what I'm gonna have to do is we're gonna have to separate this. I'm gonna have to put the strut up in there. It's just, and it's a lot trying to manage all this at one time. So to me, it'll be a little bit easier if we just go ahead, pull this cotter key out and separate this ball joint, even though I didn't want to, and put the strut and that up in there as one unit, get it snug down, and then worry about putting the spindle on after. Now I just took a 15mm wrench and knock this loose. Now here's my plan. I painted this already, and I don't want to use a ball joint separator, so I'm hoping that we can just lightly tap on this and get this ball joint loose. It's probably not going to go that way for me though. Probably going to have to use, I may just put a towel up here and knock around on it, and it may booger it up. I may have to just respray the spindle at the top. Like I said, I really didn't want to do it this way, but we got to get this separated. Yeah, I did mess it up a little bit, but we could touch that up. So once we do that, take our 15 off. We'll move this out of the way, and then we'll set the strut in this, get it up into place and get it snugged up top. I already cleaned these all up and resprayed them, so that's why they look the way they do. Of course, they're dusty from sitting around the shop, but I chose to use the stock uppers because, guys, I want, and honestly, I wish I'd have kept the lowers because I want as little a noise as possible. I don't want this thing being creaky, and I'm just afraid that the aftermarket bottom A-arms are going to be creaky, and if they are, I may source a set of stock ones and just replace the bushings. But these bushings looked good, so I just cleaned these all up and resprayed them. So let's get them back in there. Now to put the front uppers on, you've got two nuts that go on the studs, and then you have a Torx, and you have a, I believe this is a 15 or a 13, I can't remember. But I cleaned this up on my grinder wheel over there. Here's the deal, guys. This is normally supposed to have two of the Torx on one side, and what we do is we substitute for a couple reasons. One, I like things symmetrical, so we'll put one Torx on one side and one bolt. Normally there'd be two Torx on the driver's side, and another reason you do that is if you ever have to take it out, it makes life a little easier. You generally don't have to undo the brake bracket. So this one right here, the 13, you'll be able to use an open-end wrench to get the 13 out, as opposed to undoing your brake master, which is something you're gonna have to do normally. These things are side specific too, so you'll see when you're going together, there's a left stamped on the top of your A-arm, your upper A-arm anyway. And so these fit a certain way. So this is how it's gonna work. You're gonna put your two nuts on this end once you get it up in the car, and your Torx and your 13, or vice versa. But now we can thread this thing up into the car, trying to make sure we've got plenty of spinning down here, so it's not gonna matter as much. I'm gonna see if I can get this up in there. You can see I've got it stabbed up in there, and I've got these two started. Now you can see what I'm talking about. We could put our Torx in this back one because we could still get to it. Now we're gonna have to pull some pressure up. But then a lot of times, instead of having to undo this, we can sneak this guy in. Now we're gonna have to tighten this up a little bit in order to bring it closer, but you get the idea. Normally there's a Torx here and here. You can see that I did pull the master out. Just be careful not to mess with the brake lines. We've got a little bit of movement, but yeah. So 37 is what the bolts go to, and 32 foot-pounds is what the nut goes to. So I'm gonna go ahead and torque those down. I won't show you guys when I do the other side, I don't think. And then we'll get the master cylinder back where it goes and get it snugged down as well. Now that we got those snugged down, 32 on these, 37 on the bolts. I did put the master back in. Those are 15 millimeters, guys. You should be able to reach this one with the swivel, and this one you can go underneath the brake lines. Those go to 21 foot-pounds. So let's move on to the bottom now and see if we can get our strut into place in the lower. Now, if you're using what I'm using, it's gonna come with new bolts. But I think we'll be able to get that started next. Those go to 48 foot-pounds. Now that we've got that torque to 48, we're gonna go ahead and set our whole brake assembly, hub assembly, spindle onto this, hopefully setting it on the bottom first, getting the nut started on it. We're not gonna worry about torquing it just yet. I just wanna get it on there. And then, guys, we'll be able to hopefully hook up the brake line to the back of the caliper, and then we're just gonna have to figure out where we're gonna need to be as far as this guy goes. I was kind of nervous at first because of the amount of room back there, but I think we're gonna be okay as far as keeping the piping away from the suspension, especially with this, because this is quite a bit more slender than the factory setup. That cup on the factory one's quite a bit bigger. I still think it's designed to work with that, but either way, let's get the spindle in here. Now, what's the likelihood that I can't get the spindle started? Golly, this thing's heavy. Oh Oh man, yeah, that's gonna work. It's just crazy I couldn't get it in there all as one unit. I think it's just, one, guys, is just so freaking heavy. Got this bottom nut started, and now I'm hoping, I think I'm gonna go grab a jack, put it under the A-arm, and we'll just lift this thing up and get it to its proper house, which is that upper. And I've got it started here. And I'll probably go ahead and snag the torque settings and go ahead and get these things snugged down while I've got pressure up against things. Now, this isn't optimal, right? We need, I'm not gonna hook up the ball joint yet because we may have to take the rack out. And I wanna be able to spin this freely, but I am gonna go ahead, I don't remember the torque specs, I'm gonna have to look it up real quick. We'll get the torque specs on this thing, get the bottom locked down, the top locked down, and get our cotter keys in, and then hopefully we can move on to getting the line hooked up to the brake and kind of seeing where we need to go. I went ahead and got that torque down. So that goes to 38, and then we got the cotter pin in there. You may have to swing just a little further past. And then down here we got this to 79, and you can see we got the cotter pin in it. So now I'm gonna attempt to loosen the brake line right there. Probably gonna have to bag it so it doesn't leak everywhere. And I'm gonna bag it on both sides probably, but then I wanna unbag this and get this bolted to the caliper, and then we can kind of see where we need to go with the brake line. This really was close anyway. As you can see, it's like borderline touching. And so I was trying to work with what I had, but this obviously didn't work. With this thing needs to literally face the complete opposite way. So it needs to come out on the inner side and come out this way. So we'll just have to experiment with it. Let me get this bolted down and see where we're at from there. Now have both brakes, brake line from that to the car hooked up. But here's the deal, guys. Like I said, I'm gonna have to make new brake lines. It's just not gonna work. So there's a couple things we need to do. I would love to start like hooking some stuff up, you know, but ultimately, in order to get the brake line from this side over to the other side, and for me to be happy with it, I think I'm gonna remove the rack. So you notice that I did not hook up our tie rod ends. You can see those down there. And, but I needed the A-arms in and all that to kind of see how our piping is gonna fit. So the next step is I need to make brake lines. Well, in order to do that, I'm gonna go ahead and loosen, I think they're 18 on one side, 18 on the top. I reversed the way the rack mounts so we could get it out if there was ever an issue without pulling the motor up, because the stock location doesn't allow for that. So I'm gonna take the 15 and 18s out, get the rack loose. We're gonna have to take the 11 loose that I went ahead and bolted and torqued down for the steering shaft. I have to take that out. And then I'm also loving the fact that we got this turn one pulley now, because I can reach in here and get this out, so I don't actually have to unhook the lines. I can just drag this all out as one unit. That is going to take me a minute. I'll do that off camera. Get that out of the way, and then maybe, hopefully, we'll have room to do what we need to do. At least that's what I'm hoping. You can see I've got the rack out now and the pump, and back here is where that T is. You can see my T fitting. I went ahead and unhooked the brake lines that I had in place. So now I'm going to go ahead and remove these hard lines, get them out, and then we're just going to have to try to figure out a way to route these. But before I do that, we're gonna have to kind of put the intercooler in front and see where those lines need to face. So remember, I said we hooked the line up that goes to the caliper, but we're gonna disconnect it here, and we're gonna unhook this, and we're gonna get the old lines out of place, and then we're gonna go from there, kind of seeing what we need to be doing.